Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have a sharp game to share with you from 2002. On the white end, Judit Polgar, playing against Antonio Granero Roca. Alright, we have an open Sicilian, accelerated dragon, g6. Polgar's weapon of choice against this, c4, the Maróczy Bind. Nice grip over d5, very difficult for black to now free his position with this break. So within this structure, the most likely break for black will be with b5. Alright, Polgar's dark square bishop is planted on g5 in this game. Black continues in a standard way, fianchettos. If the bishop is challenged right now, white's prepared to give up bishop for knight. And with the e-pawn no longer around, white will look to play on these newly created weaknesses. d5 and d6 are now both holes. Alright, in this game though, it's the simple bishop g7. And now we have a retreat with knight c2. So there's a general and specific note behind this retreat. Black was threatening something. If white routinely continues to develop here, this is a tactical shot available to black. Knight takes e4, unleashing the bishop on d4. Very familiar tactic out of this accelerated dragon variation. If we play it out just a couple more moves, if knight takes knight here, here's a slick continuation. Bishop takes knight check, and now queen b6, threatening mate. If you castle, the bishop falls. Bishop e3 to defend, there's queen takes knight. In the end, black's up a pawn. Okay, so this was a specific note behind knight c2. Ducks the tactic on e4. More generally, knight c2 is saying, hey, I have space. Let's play with this position with 4 minor pieces on board. White's not so quick to exchange a pair of knights. All right, from here it's castles. If black plays h6 here, the bishop will not exchange itself for the knight in this case. Bishop d2 is considered best. If you go to the e3 square, you're asking for knight g4 moves. It's not stable. So h6 in this position, bishop d2 is a good reaction. In this game, it's castles, bishop e2, and follow-up here is queen to a5. Now, if the bishop is questioned in this case with h6, bishop e3 is appropriate. With the bishop on e2, there's no fear of knight g4 moves. All right, queen a5 in this game. The bishop's under fire. Now, black has to be on the lookout for discovered attacks against the queen. Follow up a6, castles, bishop d7, queen rooks get involved, and from here we have f4. With f4 in there, the e-pawn, we might say, increases in value. f4 supports in plenty of lines an e5, pawn break. Now proceed with caution. Before playing f4, you really should be asking yourself, am I susceptible to a fancy tactic along this diagonal? Fancy check available for black? In the game, black continues with rook e8. And do know the b-pawn here is poison. If black tries to land a check and pick the pawn up, the queen's a goner after rook b1. Okay, rook e8 in this game, what the computer wants to play here is b5. It says you can now get away with this break. So why is this the case? Well, how does this look? Let's see. If white now takes on b5 with the knight, discovered attack against the queen here, black can make use of this open diagonal. Landing a check, white can hit back, but the queen stays trained on this b file and is now ready to meet a knight move with queen takes b2. She's not trapped, in this case, with the bishop on e3 rather than d2. The knight on c3 doesn't have support. Okay, black does not go for the b5 break. It's rook e8 here. In comes a3. Computer once more wants to go for the b5 break. Black has a different idea in mind, and that is a check on b6. And after king h1, we have knight a5 here. Now, I want you to have just a look here at the knight positions at the moment. Move 15. Note where they're at. We're going to see a significant shift in knight quality very soon. Now, what the computer wants to play here is e5. Now, I must admit, this is a move you probably have to spend, I don't know, like a half hour on, weighing the pros and cons. Extremely difficult move to play. There's some serious positional weaknesses created with this move. d6 and d5 are now holes. White has ideas to remove. The only defender of d5, knight d5, knight b4, knight d5. Okay, you really have to have your head screwed on straight before playing a move like e5. Now, one thing I can say here is that e5 at least, in a way, tries to justify this rook e8 move. Black does at least threaten something to capture on f4 and the rook springs to life. I'm drawing some attention here to the e8 rook for a reason. After this game is over, one of the things I reflected on, I looked back at this rook e8 move, and I thought to myself, you know what, it ended up not really being a productive piece. It comes off as a bit of a wasted move, I feel. Rook f to e8 ends up not being justified. Okay, in this game, no e5, we have knight a5. Now, it turns out that knight a5 is now a losing move. How would you continue here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, the best move, e5. Now, this is the first time that it's available now that the knight is no longer around watching over that square. e5 is there. Black responds with knight to h5. If you first capture, you're helping the rook, so Black says, let me just play knight h5 straight away. And now that there isn't a knight on f6 controlling d5, well, in comes knight d5, back-to-back moves, taking advantage of the weakness of the last move. Queen is kicked. Back home, she has a responsibility. If you're stepping on c5, you're running into b4, the fork. Okay, she goes back home. Follow-up now is knight to e3. So, move 18. Look at the knight positions all of a sudden. The white knights right in the center, and these guys living on the edge. Just 3 moves ago, the black knights were nice and central. Knight e3, as it turns out, is not the best way forward for white. There's a more direct path for white. The decisive continuation here for white is the forceful bishop captures knight, and then a capture on d6. Now, white doesn't have to worry about the knight being kicked. This guy can stick around for a bit. It likes continuing from here with f5. Ready to pry open the f-file, ready to smash through. On h5, maybe even an f6 move to squash this dark square bishop. Winning position here for white. In the game, it's knight 2 to e3. Very healthy move, even though it's not the very best move, very healthy. Simply addressing the threat on c4, both knights on fantastic squares. From here it is e6, and now we have bishop captures knight. With no dark square bishop around, the white queen now sees a little further along the d-file, and now after the recapture, this guy here on d7 is a bit more vulnerable. It's now unprotected. So now, after the knight retreats, we have a pin on the d-file. There's a serious problem on d6. No time to take on e5, the bishop will fall. Now, the reply here, black continues with queen b6, threatens this knight on e3. What's considered best here for black is a piece sacrifice. It considers knight takes f4 and then queen takes e5 around equal. What's the imbalance we work with here? It's two knights versus a bishop and two pawns. Black has that bishop pair. Okay, black does not play in this way. Instead, it is queen b6. Pop quiz. How would you continue here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, the best move, really my favorite move of this game, c5. Interference move, a clearance move as well. c4 is now opened up for the knight. You can't take with the pawn, because then white is ready to take the bishop and you can't take the knight in return. Black continues here with queen takes pawn, knight c4 still, knight takes d6, landing a fork nearby for white. Black continues with bishop c6. Now a very healthy move, very natural to play in this way, and that is b4, kicking the queen away to a square where she now functions basically just like a bishop. She's no longer observing a center square, e5. Follow-up here is bishop captures knight. Now, what's considered best is knight takes on d6. Now, I'm going to highlight a couple variations here towards the end. This is only a 30 mover. There's some really sharp stuff that can happen if Polgar kicked off here with knight takes d6. This is going to help explain why there's this decision to first capture the knight instead on this move 24. Here's how black can respond to knight takes d6. This is some wild stuff. Black can continue here with knight takes f4. Not the first time we're seeing this piece sacrifice undermining white's center. No time in this position for white to take a rook. There'd be mate. Bishop takes g2. How does this variation carry out exactly? Well, believe it or not, this position right here, it calls it around 0.5, even though white has an extra rook and minor piece. Material-wise, black's only compensation is two pawns, but this variation I'm about to share with you really emphasizes the power of two bishops on adjacent diagonals pointing right at an enemy king. Combined with a queen, can very easily turn deadly. So if we take this out just a little bit more, let's say rook h4, there's queen g5, targeting these two, and rook g4, queen h6, it calls this even. Serious threat here. Queen g1, there's bishop takes h2 still. Preparing to meet queen takes bishop with queen takes rook. Really wicked position here. One final note, how bad can this turn out for white? Well, check this out. If you, let's say, go back home trying to just stay coordinated, black now wins. The planets align for black after queen h3. Pawn is pinned, and now black threatens two mate in ones. There's no defense. Okay, really sharp stuff to be sure. In this game, it is bishop captures knight. Don't have to worry about any sacrifices on f4. Black continues here in a very routine way, simply recaptures on h5, and it is now going to be a winning position for white from there. Black's last try here to stay in the game is another piece sacrifice. Bishop captures g2. That's really a 2-point pawn with the follow-up rook captures knight. It calls this position here even after doubling the rooks on the c file, follow up, capture on e5, knight versus 2 pawns imbalance. And black has a significantly safer king. Okay, in this game, we have the simple recapture on h5, and this is simply a goner now for black. Knight takes d6 with a fork. Black manages to get out of the fork, but the white queen definitely being a queen. We got a pin. Both of these rooks are x-rayed. Doubled up on the d file. Here comes the f pawn, ready to take advantage of the pinned bishop. Black's out of the pin, but white's able to simply play in a forceful way, capture on e6, and then land a check on f7. And that one there forces black's resignation. What is black supposed to do here? If you move the king, you're going to lose a full rook. Queen's on that square. And if you capture the knight, this is going to lead to mate after queen takes rook. All you could do are silly moves like this, blocking, mate in just a few from here. But in this game, after knight takes f7, black simply resigns. So, what'd you think of this one? Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.